right. Good morning, dudes and dudettes. Today we're learning. Oh, wait, one take. Everybody knows the rule. We're learning about the UK today. All right, everybody. So I'm going to do a quick overview of everything you need to know for the United Kingdom. This is going to be very simple, very easy. So, first off, what do we need to start with? We need to start with the most important thing, and that is the parliamentary system. What is the parliamentary system? It's called the executive fusion, to where the executive and the legislative are combined. That's what we see here. As you see, they have the House of Commons, our legislative branch. On the inside of it, our executive branch in green, Prime Minister. This is by far the most important perspective. This is where all of the comparative nature comes in when it comes to our class. When it comes to class, we're going to be focusing on the parliamentary system, and we're going to be focusing on how each individual branch compares to other countries. So, first off, we have the most important legislative executive, the executive fusion. That's the parliamentary system. Next, we have the aspect of bicameral legislature. So that means we have the House of Lords and the House of Commons. Well, what's important about either of these two? First things first, let's start with the most useless. Again, I don't want to be too strong, but for this class, in most argumentations, House of Lords is not very important because it is now a ceremonial position rather than what it was back in the day. Previously, it used to be after you won a war, after you did something really good for your community, after you've worked in the House of Commons for 40 years, you became a lord, so you go to the House of Lords. In today's society, again, it's still rather ceremonial, but what ends up happening is that is kind of the top of the chain per se, and what they could do theoretically is delay, but they're the top. If we go down, we go to the House of Commons. The House of Commons, they are kind of the meat and potatoes of what is the government of the United Kingdom. What they're trying to do is they're actually creating these laws, and they are sending those laws to the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister ends up creating a group of people called the Cabinet from the House of Commons, from the MPs. They are going to go together to create a finalization of that law and then send that law to the House of Lords. If the Lords say it's okay, sends to the monarch says it's okay, bada boom, bada bing, we got a law. So at the end of the day, the vast majority of the work is happening in the House of Commons. First off, well, how do you become part of the House of Commons? Well, the way you become a Minister of Parliamentary is going to be first past the post. That is going to be 50% plus one vote, and that is argumentatively a pretty bad thing in the world of government. We're going to argue pretty heavily that first past the post systems are not the best. And that is simply because it favors a 2 to 3 party system, which what we see inside of the United Kingdom. Previously, it was very much so just Labour versus Conservatives, and now there's the Liberal Party, which is kind of more the centrist, but it leans left, and that is going to create a really bad scenario for a lot of individuals inside of the Labour Party because they're kind of fighting for the same votes. But overall, this is due to first past the post, meaning that you can only pick one or the other party. You do not have proportional representation, which allows you to vote for multiple parties at the same time, leading to a 2 to 3 party system, which is what we see in the United Kingdom. That's going to be very important. You get a lot of questions about that often. So, we have the House of Commons. Well, how do you become a Prime Minister? Well, you first have to become a Minister of Parliament. You have to become an MP. And to become the Prime Minister, or the head of government, is that you are going to have to essentially go through an election process, and that election process a lot of times is just being picked. You're part of the winning team. This is why it moves in a wave. Always remember that the United Kingdom moves in a wave. They have this party control, meaning that the Prime Minister is of the winning team. So that means the majority gets to kind of pick who they want to be leading it. As you've seen inside of the United Kingdom over the past decade, the Conservative Party has been in power, and there's just been a new Prime Minister, because they're controlling the wave. They're having this party control. And that's one of the most powerful things that the Prime Minister has, is this power of party control. The other great part about the House of Commons and the legislative branch is that they have a very simple way to get the Prime Minister out of power, which is called the vote of no confidence. Due to there being no official term limits, it is very easy to just get the Prime Minister out. Again, that's why over the past decade in the United Kingdom, there has been ample amount of Prime Ministers. It's because there's a simple way to get them out. They don't do what they say, vote them out, easy peasy lemon squeezy, no term limits. That has also been the opposite, though. You have had multiple prime ministers in the United Kingdom who've been leader for a decade. Margaret Thatcher comes to mind as probably the most important one because she was a rather influential person inside of modern economics and politics. But that is kind of the simple overlap of the parliamentary system, that executive fusion, is that the Prime Minister and the House of Commons are on the same team, which makes creating laws super easy. And because the House of Lords does not have a formal way to actually end a law, it really just means that laws can get pushed through rather quickly in the United Kingdom comparative to a Nigeria or to a Mexico, the other democratic countries. So that is the bread and butter. If you have no time and you just want to focus on that, that's what you should be focusing on, because that's going to be about 90% of the questions when it comes to anything to involve the actual way the government functions. A little bit more detail now. So there are a few things that are rather important to talk about specifically that are only in the United Kingdom. The first one is that you have devolution. Devolution is where the United Kingdom has allowed the Scottish, the Northern Irish, and the Welsh to have their own political system, let's say. They have their own parties that are protected inside of the parliament, and they are able to have their own rules and regulations for their areas. That is really important because the United Kingdom, obviously, due to its history with Northern Ireland and the Scottish devolution movement, lots of the other people inside the United Kingdom outside of England maybe aren't so happy with England having the vast control over the government. So devolution is huge. Next, constitutional monarchy. The monarch has given up their powers. They have admitted and said, we do not want this role anymore. We will collect taxes. We'll have a nice house. We'll be part of this figurehead. We'll be the head of state, meaning that we're going to go kiss babies. We're going to go meet with important people. We're going to go have some fun and be important figures inside of society. But governmentally, we don't do too much anymore. So that constitutional monarchy, they've given up their powers. They're still there. They technically could theoretically veto or take back their powers, but they don't do that because why would they? Is also a rather important thing that we can talk about. And then finally, probably the final thing that is, I don't know how often you would get this on a test because it is rather, I don't want to say difficult, but I would say it's hard to articulate in a simple way, especially in a test format, is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court inside of the United Kingdom is relatively new for a country as old as the United Kingdom. The Supreme Court is new due to the fact that they do not have an actual constitution. They are based off of common law. Common law is essentially simplified as a law based off of what everyone does. So if everyone drives on the left side of the road, then that is the common law. They don't theoretically have to write down that slavery is bad. You just kind of know that in the 2020s, slavery is bad outside of some countries and certain areas that love slavery. But the idea is that they don't have to have a constitution. And because of that, it's really hard to have judicial review. Judicial review is where the judiciary, or typically the Supreme Court, is able to have control over the laws. It's really hard to do that with common law. So the Supreme Court doesn't have full judicial review. They have done judicial review in the past over certain laws and certain situations, but overall, the Supreme Court is there. It has a role, but unlike Nigeria and unlike Mexico, their Supreme Court does not have significantly as much power. But formally, they are there. That is essentially everything you need to know. This little diagramma that I've created, I think, is a great way to kind of memorize it, right? There's a vertical accountability, right? The citizens have a vertical accountability of the House of Commons, which has a vertical accountability of the House of Lords and Monarch, and it also goes back down again. The Monarch has accountability over the Lords, Lords over Commons, Commons over citizens. At the end of the day, they have to work together or else there's going to be problems. As well as there is a form of horizontal, or I guess you want to say, checks and balances, where the Supreme Court can check the House of Commons, the Prime Minister or the executive branch can check the House of Commons or the legislative branch, so on and so forth. Overall, though, this is essentially everything you need to know, and I hope that that is all good. Have a great rest of your day. Sleep well, eat well, have fun.